Hey there guys, my name is Bizzleberry and I am a Grandmaster support main. At least currently I'm Grandmaster, touch wood. I have brought a lot of guides so far onto the channel. So far we've been through Senna, we've been through Nami and Zyra, and this is the fourth one of my series that I'm doing at the moment. And I hope you guys have been enjoying it. Those kind of champions and more supports will be coming this month and next month, and if you enjoy that kind of stuff with the actual guide content, then please consider subscribing and following and letting me know what kind of champion you want me to do next. I'm definitely going to be doing some tanks in 10.12. At the moment we're on 10.11, so once 10.12 comes in with the Guardian changes, we'll be doing more of like Leona and things like that. So let's go into, so if you haven't seen the guides I've done before, we go through runes, we go through items, ability, skill orders, abilities, little tips and tricks maybe, and this is generally how I do stuff. So if you want to copy what I do, then do exactly as I say. So at the moment I would only recommend one build on Lulu. There would be a Guardian build, but it might become outdated in 10.12, but this is the primary Lulu enchanter build that you'll be looking at for when you're playing her. Summon Aery is your keystone, a mana flow band. Now the next two runes in sorcery you can change depending on what you want. So Transcendence plus Gathering Storm is like a mid-game boost. Around 10 minutes you'll start seeing the effects of Gathering Storm, and around about 18 to 20 minutes you'll start getting the extra 10% cooldown reduction with Transcendence. Now if you want something a little bit more urgent for the laning phase, then take Absolute Focus and go Scorch. But do bear in mind that if you do go these two runes, once you get to mid game, like Scorch is terrible by past very early laning phase, so this would give you that little early game boost if you need it. Otherwise just look towards Transcendence and Gathering Storm if you don't know, or if you definitely just want to focus on mid game onwards. Inspiration is secondary, is what you will definitely want. But what I would suggest here is, again, there's some things that you can do here. Cookies and Cosmic Insight is the most basic, bare bones thing that you can do without having to think too much. Alternately, you could go into Stopwatch and Cookies. That is a perfectly fine build too. If you feel like you might better get away with it, you could also do Free Boots. Free Boots is extremely cost effective. But your main build that you'll be looking at into most of your games will be Biscuits and Cosmic Insight. Now Lulu's interaction with her passive, which we'll talk about more once we get into game, you'll be wanting to do a lot of auto attacks. So the attack speed comes in pretty nicely in landing those extra picks hits in laning phase. So I highly advise you to take the attack speed here. If you truly not concerned about auto hitting, maybe potentially if you're going a Relic Shield build and playing safer in the lane, you could just do double Adaptive Force, there's no problem there. And then make sure, as always, that defensive rune at the bottom there is adjusted to what you're playing against. So if you're playing against AD bot side, take the armor, otherwise AP, take the magic resistance. And that's it. Quick cover overview of the Lulu runes. It wasn't too bad. What we'll do now is we'll go through into the practice tool, and we'll go into more further information there. I'll make sure I take the base skin as well, not to confuse people. And we'll take the Ignite. Now, so the common summoners on bot side depends on how passive and how aggressive you want to be. I think 90% of the time you'll be taking Ignite. You may want to take Exhaust if there's a lot of assassins onto the enemy team. That is viable too. There may be a rare circumstance that your AD carry may ask you to take Heal if they're taking Barrier or Exhaust themselves. Generally depends on how aggressive you feel like you can be during that laning phase. Most of the time you're looking to play Lulu with a hyper carry. So by hyper carry, what I mean by that is someone who does a lot of auto attacks and then generally scales really well once they get to mid and then finally to the late game. So a lot of auto attacking basically. So those champions are basically Vayne, Twitch, Kog'Maw, Jinx. Those are the four primary ones that I can think of on the top of my head right now. But if you can think of any other hyper active auto attacking champions, then those would also be included in the list. That's the primary reason why you'll be taking Lulu in solo queue, because of the synergy that she has with those auto attacking champions, and that's through her abilities, which we'll talk about soon. First, we'll talk about, well, on the talk about auto attacking, we'll talk about her items. So in terms of items, you will want the Spell Thief's Edge, ideally, and every time you auto attack with the Spell Thief's Edge, you'll get the 1 proc from your auto attack, and then your picks, your passive, the little Aery companion, there will also do an auto attack at the same time, and that will also get you 10 gold. So once you do it at 1 attack, you'll get 2 charges off on your Spell Thieves. So it's pretty nice. If you have to play really, really defensively because of a massive hard engage bot side, then you'll have to do Relic Shield. People are asking about Xayah. Yeah, you could do it with Xayah. Lulu Xayah would work too. Tristana can work too. So, Spell Thief's Edge is the ideal starting build. Also gives you a little bit extra base mana as well. And then the primary reason to why you want Lulu is all to do with the auto attacks. So you'll be most likely buying Ardent Censer first. The only case you wouldn't be buying Ardent Censer first is if you're playing with an AD carry champion that is not a hyper carry. So something like a Jhin is the classic example of that. You wouldn't want an Ardent Censer with a Jhin as he doesn't scale off attack speed that well. An Ardent Censer is basically a massive steroid where the more attacks per second that your AD carry does, the more damage this Ardent Censer will do. So because we're sticking with the auto attacking theme, Ardent Censer will be your first key item, and then you can move into quite a few different things here. So Athene's Unholy Grail will give you decent AP boost, and will give you a tiny heal as well when you shield if you've been doing some damage. Say if you hit some of your other abilities, like your Q, you will then be able to get some blood charges there. So overall you'll be taking this. It's a nice general little item, tiny bit of magic resistance. So you still got a 10% cooldown reduction, and the AP scaling on that will be nice when combined with the other healing items. Redemption as well is a pretty good item too. All of the classic enchanter healing items. Alternatively, you could do a Zeke's combined with an Ardent Censer. Now the interesting interaction with the Zeke's is not as good as the Ardent, but it will continue to give your AD carry extra attack on their auto attacks. So it depends on how much you think you're going to get out of the Zeke's. Generally it's a bit extreme, I would say, but the resistances that come with it are quite nice. 60 armor and 30 magic resistance are quite nice. But it's quite an extreme route. You could do like Ardent Censer into Athene's Unholy Grail into Zeke's. That could be a viable path. But yeah, Lulu can take a lot of tools. Like she could even go Knight's Vow. Your main primary focus is just thinking about how much can you boost your AD carry and keep them alive in the fights as long as possible while making sure they output the most amount of DPS possible. So Zeke's is viable. If you're having trouble tracking down champions, Twin Shadows or Shrillias is decent. Honestly, I probably would lean more towards the Shrillias rather than the Twin Shadows, as it will buff up the movement speed of your entire team, and ideally you and your AD carry aren't alone, so that would help you all engage all at once. That is viable. Do not advise the Locket, as that shield is based off bonus HP, so wouldn't advise you to take Locket at all. Michael's you could take as well if there's a lot of CC on the enemy team. There is a chance as well your AD carry could be taking Cleanse, actually, and then that's when you might want to be picking up a more defensive summoner as well. If they take Cleanse, then you probably won't need this Michael's as much. But the definitely absolute first item you're looking at is Ardent Censer, and then you're having to actually think outside the box and try and think and meld what you need. But the most basic one would be Athene's and then Redemption. Ardent, Athene's and Holy Grail, Redemption. That is like the core. And then boots wise, you could go Transcendence. Moby Boots is fine because you'll find that one of your abilities will boost the movement speed of your ally, and it can be really difficult to help chase up on where they're going. So Moby Boots can help with that once you fall out of combat. Otherwise, you could it's all situational. Like if you feel like you're not getting targeted that much, Lucidity works. If they've got a lot of AD on their team, Ninja Tabby works. If they've got a lot of CC on their team, Crowd Control, Merc Treads is also a good idea. So ideally, you're knowing a little bit about what the enemy champions do as well, so you can build accordingly. But if you don't know, then I advise you either Mobility Boots or Boots of Lucidity if you're not sure. So that's the items covered there. We'll go over the abilities now. So Lulu really has like 5 abilities. I know she's only got 4, but her W is a 2 component, which we'll talk about shortly. Let me just level up all the way to level 18 here. And we'll put down a couple of dummies. There we go, just went past them. Allied, enemy. Okay, so her picks, as we mentioned earlier, every time you auto attack, if you have a look at the picks, it will also shoot a little bit of DPS out as well with every single auto attack that you do. Now, if you shield someone else with your E, so if you shield your ally and they were then to start doing auto attacks, you can see how the pix has gone to them rather than onto you. So that pix stays on for quite some time. And if they were to auto attack, that will also then be doing the pick damage. As you can see, Lulu doesn't have the additional damage from that until it then returns. The E is also a shield. We'll talk about the E first, then properly. The E is also a shield. And actually it's also a damage ability too, which will also reveal stealth targets. So if you're against like a Twitch or an Evelyn, it's sometimes quite important to make sure that reveal stays on them so that they don't get to slip away. Also, it'll give you vision when the enemy goes into the brush and you haven't got any wards. So actually go back on that statement. Lulu's really got 6 abilities because her W is a 2 component as well. So your E is both a shield and a damaging ability. Most of the time, outside in laning phase, a lot of the time you'll be using it as like 50% of the time as aggro. It does a lot of base damage early, but you should also be looking to do it to block like other support skill shots usually. So things like Yumi Q, it does a really good job just blocking the entire damage from that, and the shield only costs 60 mana, whereas like Yumi Q costs around about 90. Is more expensive than the E from Lulu, the shield. So there's the shield's pretty cheap and it blocks, the shield value is quite strong. So it is generally very valuable at blocking the other support skill shots. So it ends up being mana cost effective, and then you can make the enemy that way. But later on, once you're outside laning phase, 95% of the time you'll be shielding your AD carry, or shielding whoever needs it, whoever's auto attacking the most. That not only will they get shielded, but then they'll also be able to get the extra DPS out of your picks as well. Now we'll talk about your Q. Your Q is a slow that also will come out of your picks. So if we shield our AD carry and we do a Q, it will come out of both of us, and it does a slow. So this can also be used on minions. Come back, minions. So you can use that on the minion as well. Wish I had the cooldown. I need to turn the cooldowns off quickly. Sorry, this is a little bit awkward, me chasing off this minion. Come back. As you can see there, you can do that on the minions too. You can do that on enemy minions, and that works off enemy champions as well. Come back here. So once again, that works off enemies as well. So that can be a good way in poke Q harassing at a safe distance. Just bear in mind it's pretty expensive to do, because not only is your Q 50 mana, but then you would have to do your E as well, which is 60. So just doing like that in terms of just focusing only for Q harassment is very expensive. But it's a nice peeling tool. So when the enemy's chasing you, it's a really good tool to get away. Sometimes you can actually snipe some kills very early in the laning phase, but it's the ability that you will be maxing last. It's just a nice little slow overall, and there's an okay-ish poke in lane, and it gives you a tiny bit of wave clear as well. You can use that to help push the bot wave CS, the creeps, the minions, in order to reset the wave quicker. Now, the main reason why Lulu is played is because of her W, Whimsy, which also turns into either a polymorph as well. So 2 component here. So this will speed up your AD carry movement speed and also increase their attack speed as well by quite a considerable amount, and the movement speed portion scales with ability power. Otherwise, if you use it on an enemy, it polymorphs them for quite a considerable time, and it's really good against assassins. Bear in mind this is affected by Merc Treads, the boots, so if there is any tenacity on the enemy, this won't last as long. but it's really good against someone like Kassadin, like someone jumping in straight away, or like a LeBlanc, any assassin, just jumping in onto you, and then you polymorph them, and they're stuck into that for quite a considerable time, especially when there's more points in. Now that is your key ability on Lulu. You want to get that maxed first, but we're going to be doing a wonky skill order in order to do that, because if we were to put all of our points in W from the get-go, our laning phase would be terrible. So the power thing in the actual skill order would be 2 to 3 points in E, because you can still use your E to damage. That's the shield. And it also gives a decent amount of protection. But then the key component on the Lulu is to max the W. At the moment, it is a 2.25 polymorph duration, which is huge. Absolutely huge. And honestly, the cooldown isn't even that bad on it. With the core component that you have with 3 items, with 45% CDR, it's only a 6.6 cooldown. So yeah, really nice. And then you can almost, if you were to use this on an AD carry to buff them up in terms of the steroid, it's basically got almost perma uptime. Almost perma uptime. So it's amazing. Now, your decision making when you're in a fight will always be deciding whether to use your W, your boost on your ally, or use it as a polymorph for an enemy. Now, the very clear example I mentioned there was if there's an assassin jumping in and being a primary threat to you or your AD carry, you need to polymorph them. Stop their DPS coming out at all and try and kill them before that happens. That is like the best way you'll be using your W in terms of against assassins. Otherwise, if that isn't a concern, then you need to be using the W on your AD carry as much as possible so they can kite around and they've got a lot of extra damage coming from the auto attack speed. They're then giving, with that auto attack speed, even if you just do your W, it will pass over Aery, which will then give them the Ardent Censer buff. Just the Aery alone, the shield will give them Ardent Censer. So if you can't get in range after that, they'll at least have that. Then ideally you then give them the E, so they got boosted attack speed, and that means more attacks from the picks, and then it's just a lot of extra damage with whatever on-hit items they have as well. So you can see already how Lulu is just a crazy steroid for one auto-attacking champion. Make that clear, it's just for one. Now your ultimate, which I haven't talked about yet, which makes your AD carry a little bit larger, so they're easier to actually click on, but it gives them max HP, and it knocks away any champions or units next to them. So you just can demonstrate that here. Boom, like that. So that's good at, say, you have 2 options to use that. The most obvious one is to get someone off your AD carry. Alternately, you could use that to, say, if your tank is going in and there's a channeled spell going on, you could then use that to interrupt something because it is a knock-up, or you could enable like a Yasuo to use his ultimate as well. So a lot of decision making that goes in Lulu. So that's Lulu's abilities in a nutshell. So the ability path thing, once again, is 3 points in E, just for the laning phase, and then you want to max your W, and then you go back and put the rest of your points back into your shield, and then you finally then last put all your leftover points into the Glitter Lance, the Q. Okay, how do we get rid of these minions? Go away, minions. Can't get rid of them. They won't go away. Minions. There we go. Shame we don't get all the CS gold from that. That is basically the core of Lulu. It's just a lot of decision making. You really should only be picking it with a hyper carry, as I mentioned. If you pick it with a Jhin, you're taking a lot of that attack speed power from her. And that's primarily why she's played, is just before the movement speed and the attack speed. You'll see her a lot with Lulu Cogmore, Lulu Twitch, Lulu Vayne. Like, those are the most frequent ones played. So depending on the meta that you're finding at the moment, then it depends on on how good those 3 champions are becoming, and like how good then Lulu becomes. Because if hyper carries aren't particularly strong right now, then you won't find it as good. Apart from that, there's probably one other thing I could mention: an Ardent Censer juggling trick. And then apart from that, there's nothing else really that's left to cover here. So Ardent Censer juggling. So say if you're doing Baron buff and you want to get off as many Ardent Censers on people to increase their attack speed. So if you guys don't know, Ardent Censer increases the attack speed of any ally that you shield or heal. So say you're doing Baron, all of you guys are grouped around the Baron. To get your absolute most damage out, what you want to do is first you want to W your AD carry. So W AD carry, and then not only will they get the attack speed steroid, but they will also get the Aery, so they'll get Ardent as well. And then you want to shield whoever's tanking Baron, and then they will get Ardent Censer as well. And then by the time your W's back off cooldown again, or your E, you do that rotation over and over again. So then you W AD carry, the Aery then goes over to your AD carry. Just make sure that Aery goes over to your AD carry so that it gets the Ardent Censer buff still as well. And then you E your tank. But it shouldn't take too long to do Baron anyway. Just makes it a little bit quicker. If you're playing with a hyper carry that has a lot of on hit, that is the most powerful thing against Baron, or any neutral objective, and that's the most efficient way to do it. Does Ardent proc off Font of Life? Yes, it does. Sometimes slightly off topic here, but you'll see some champions like Zillion maybe taking Font of Life because anyone that then attacks that Font of Life target will then receive the Ardent Censer buff. I wouldn't advise you to necessarily go Font of Life on Lulu, but if you end up in the resolve tree, then you could go down that way for sure. Any great counters into Lulu? In terms of counters, there isn't too much that counters her. The only thing, the one thing that truly counters Lulu is the fact that you're playing with the wrong AD carry. Another thing that counters Lulu is having a bad AD carry. If you are gambling when you're playing Lulu. I will make that clear. If you do not trust your AD carry, then Lulu might not be the best idea. Especially if there's no other champion on your team that is focusing on auto attacks. Because what will happen is that you are focusing on buffing one champion, and if that champion is not good, then you're in trouble. If you have no other, say you don't have like a Kindred jungle, or maybe someone like a Fiora topside, you really need to have someone else on your team with auto attacks to make it work. I mean, it's not impossible, but that's like 50 to 60% of the power Lulu disappeared if you have no one else on your team that can do AD. With the auto attacks, if the rest of your team is AP, sure, you can like polymorph assassins and then like shield an occasional target every now and then, but they won't benefit from the Ardent Censer, so that's gold wasted there, and it just becomes really tricky at that point. So yeah, hopefully this little rundown helps you out with Lulu. If you did like it, then like and subscribe and all of that. I do hope some of the things I mentioned, if you're looking new at playing Lulu, or looking to play Lulu, or just wanting to understand what Lulu even does, I hope this has helped you out a bit. Unfortunately, there isn't too much to her in terms of what to cover, but hopefully the rundown helps and how I play Lulu, and maybe you can, when you next see a Vayne in your game, you can then pick her up, and then, if your Vayne's doing well, then you'll do well as well. So take care, hope you're doing well, and look out for another one. Should be doing Swain next.